Okay, can you all hear me okay? In the back? Yes? Okay. Thank you all for coming. Welcome. This is our last, our fourth for this winter in-person training for teaching program from Dressage4Kids. Keep an eye out. You will be, if you're on our mailing list, if you signed up, you'll get any information because we do occasionally do a Zoom session when the mood strikes or something comes up, and anything else along those lines. Before we get going, I want to make a huge thank you to Chris Holleran and her bright red shirt. Wave your hand, Chris. She does all of the organizing. I just show up and pretend it's my thing. And I also would like to introduce and thank Mary Livernoir. Where's Mary? Mary. Oh, Mary's back there. If you had any questions, Mary is our executive director and does a huge amount of organizing and so forth for D4K. I want to make sure you all know that you're welcome. This is the 25th anniversary for Dressage4Kids, and we're having a party on the 27th here in Wellington, and you all are welcome if you sign up. We have an RSVP page. There's actually a handout up there if you all don't know about it. We're going to be having some little mini sessions for those that are new to teaching. There'll be a little information going out about that. I'm just giving a heads up. Other things that are coming up, if you don't know about with Dressage4Kids, the team clinics, which we do all over the country. If anyone's interested in hosting, these are for riders under 25. It's a matter of finding someone that comes forth in an area that says they want to host it. Anybody has the least bit of interest, you can talk to Mary, you can send an email. All of this can be found on our website. We have our 2 youth dressage festivals, which is basically dressage, equitation, and a written test. A large one in New York, a smaller one in Georgia. Just letting you all know about this, our horse donation program. We've had about 110 horses donated to D4K of all levels over the years. Anyone that's looking to receive, to lease a horse from us, we have an application online. Anyone that's interested in donating, they contact me. We have horses of all levels, etc. We also have, there's a handout up there about our scholarships specifically for instructors to be able to take a day away to go get some education. You can read about that up there. I won't take time. I hope you'll help us at the end by leaving everything neat and tidy and thrown away because we have to get out of here fast when we're done. And finally, if you didn't hear, if anyone wants to hand up a question, if you need a card, raise your hand. Where's Josephine? Josephine in the back. If you have a question you want to pass in, just raise it up and she'll come get it from you. We'll probably also take some in-person questions, and my only request with the in-person questions, unfortunately I can no longer say use your teaching voice because everybody teaches with headsets now. So we're not used to yelling, but we do request that you make sure we can hear it. And I think that's all I need to say in advance. So I've asked each of our panelists, I'm not introducing them. If you don't know who these people are, you haven't been in the dressage world, right? Sorry, but anyway. I've asked each of them to just say a few words about what they think about teaching of dressage in this country, or their pet peeves, or anything that they'd like to share with us. So are we starting at the end? Go for it.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming tonight. I'm Bill McMullen, USDF certified instructor through FEI level and USDF as dressage judge. One of the other things that Lyndon asked us about, in addition to what she said, was also something, one of our concerns, but also something we feel good about. And I'd like to concentrate on that for a moment and say that I feel good about our USDF certification program, our instructor development program. And you may or may not have heard, but with us through our COVID time, we've been trying to redevelop the program to roll it out in a good way this year with some new aspects. And we're really looking forward to those changes in the program. And they already have started a few of these with our workshops now. We have a new Education Day seminar, which is open to all USDF members, just as like the USDF, the L education program is. And then from there, then they can, for ones that want to go for further instructor development, for professional development, that is more specific guidelines for it. But again, I want to really focus on that, and I think, we're looking at it in a broad base for the whole country for sure, trying to get more people on the same page and to be familiar with the proper system of teaching and using the training scale as it's appropriate to the levels. But I think this program is especially great for young, for new professionals in the business to get their, to get established, and really looking at it as an education system. It's not just a testing system. I think everybody thinks that it's just to be tested and that's it, but it really is about education and really developing through the levels. And like I said, for young professionals that are getting into it, it's a really great way to really check in with their teaching. Teaching, riding and lunging, it has all aspects, and we won't go into all those details, but I think that's a really positive thing that's happening in our country right now. And I said now that we're a little bit over COVID, we're finally rolling out this new program this year, and we're really excited about it.
Thank you. Yes. You.
I don't think yours is working.
Test. Test. Did that work? Okay, just it's slow. So I just really encourage that all of you check out on the USDF website, because it is a new program that I think will be much more welcoming to everybody, and we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, there's dates for the new programs are available on the website, as well as lots of information specifically to the different levels and the development through the program.
Next. Your turn.
I think mine will be kind of an extension of what Bill just talked about as far as the certification program, because I think the better we are as teachers, then we bring along students to then hopefully ride and project in the show ring what us judges want to see. And I have to add also, Bill said that the program was hoping to bring along, young professionals in teaching, but I think it doesn't matter how old one is, and I think in this sport, we're always learning no matter how old we are, and even us old teachers, I think, learn from each other. So the process never stops. There's always new ways that we can develop to further our teaching skills. It's never ending. It's like the training of a horse. It doesn't just start and end. It's always ongoing. So I think one's ability to teach is a lifelong endeavor. And then I think somebody already talked about the training scale for the rider.
Well,
Okay, we'll do that. But I think all of that ties into then coming down the center line for us judges, and then understanding what we want to see, why you only got the score that you got. And I think I can speak for most judges. We want to see a picture of harmony. We want to see a well-sitting rider, not just a fancy horse going under a rider that really, in a way, has no clue how they're getting around the ring. That's not what dressage is all about. So anybody that knows me well enough knows that I'm a stickler on position. It was hammered into me at a very young age, well, before I was a teenager, and I don't think it ever stops. And I think that's where it has to start, is with the riding, not just mechanically teaching kids, people, adults, whatever, to just mechanically get on and wrestle the neck and kick to make it go. That's not what we want to see in the show ring. So I think it really depends on all of us instructors doing the best that we can to communicate the correct basics in the riding to then train the horse.
My turn. All right, I'm gonna kind of convey a little bit of what you guys were saying, and then probably move into a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, I think, for other teachers. But I am almost on the L faculty. I've got 2 more apprentice sessions left, so I'm a little more tied into the L program than Bill is. He's in the instructor part, but I'm doing a little bit with the L program, and I have to say that especially the A, B, and C sessions of the L program are very educational for everyone, because they really break down the biomechanics of how the horses move, some of the biomechanics of how the riders and the rider position affects the movements, and then of course, you know, there's just hours and hours and hours of practice of watching quality and not so great quality of many of the basic things up through 2nd level, which I think is again a benefit to everyone, because it's at the basic level. You're not just watching the piaffe and the passage. Eventually that'll build to that, of course, but just watching quality transitions and, you know, again, having the training scale repeated over and over and over again. And then jumping from that to just basically one of my little pet peeves is when I listen to some lessons, of course I don't hear this very much at Global, but kind of in other places, when I hear instructors saying things like, you need inside leg, outside rein, oh, more bend, oh, that's too much angle, where's your tempo, what about the corner, what did you do, whoa, that seems very like a scattered kind of instructional method. And if I could say there's one thing that I would like to see, is that trainers look at trying to focus on 1 or 2 things that they can instruct that rider with on that day, and keep repeating that, because repetition definitely is needed when you're trying to learn a concept, and trying to focus in on 1 or 2 different things. I think Laura King said you can only handle like 3 concepts total in any given little session of learning, and so if you start with 2 and then build to 3 and try to focus on that, and if, even though there are other things maybe that are going wrong that you don't like, maybe save that for the next lesson and build on that. I think it's our job as trainers to help the riders not only have some dedicated practice so that they get good at what they're doing, but then also to help them build in a strategic pattern from one day to the next, or one lesson to the next, 1 week to the next. Okay. Now I'm moving on to Al.
Your turn.
Okay, I'm going to go a little bit off in another direction. First off, as a positive, I go out and teach all over the place all the time, and I rarely hear something from a student, from their instructor, that I'm like, that is off the wall. I have to say that we're pretty consistent in this country, and I do feel like it follows the German training system, and you know, we're all trying to produce these well-trained horses where it is harmonious, and it's supposed to be beautiful, and it's supposed to look friendly, right? And I think that's one thing that as Americans that we do try to do well, is produce beautiful riding. I think about in my teaching that I am way more interested in producing horse trainers, especially with the young people, versus top competitors. I do think that if you're a good horse trainer, you can learn to be a top competitor. But if you don't know how to train the horse, I mean, you're always going to be sort of limited by what you're doing, or how talented your horse is, or this or that. And the other thing that I get very bothered by is riders that are riding above their level. I would be strongly in favor of a system where you have to earn the right to move up the levels. I'm for saying that out loud, but I'm going to say it anyways, because I think it would elevate the quality and the level of sport in this country tremendously if we were able to do that. But that is a fight we will continue to fight for a long time. And the last thing I'm going to say is that I think that there's not enough attention paid to rider biomechanics, how people are sitting, and it is for me, great detriment to the horse that is not a main focus. When I was a little kid, I had a wonderful dressage instructor in Hawaii that insisted I have at least one lunge lesson a week. Period. No discussion. She did it to everybody, and she prioritized the development of my seat as a kid. And I wish that was taken more seriously now.
I wanted to go last because I wanted to hear what everybody else had said. I was going to speak a little bit about what Bill had said, McMullen. I agree with all of that. I think that I also agree with Bill Warren and Annie. And I was actually going to say a little bit about the standard proficiency of riders that Allie just spoke of. I think for me as a teacher, when you're teaching someone, a new person that you don't know, if you're at a clinic or you're teaching somebody you don't know, and they come to you and they say, I would like to work on blah, blah, blah. And you've watched them warm up, and you're thinking to yourself, well, that's not really where we should be going. And I do say that, but I think as a general statement, when people could be held accountable for their own quality of riding, the riding will become even at a higher level. And that's an uphill fight. For the USDF tried many years ago to have a standardization or a whatever, I forgot what it was called, but it was totally squashed by people that didn't believe that should exist. So until that mindset can change, that is how it is. But in other countries, when you're riding 4th level, you won at a lower level. And there is a lot to be said for that. So I would say that would be one of my pet peeves. One of my other pet peeves, I would say, as a teacher is I'm more lenient or softer on people I don't know. People I know and have been in my program, I think that I'm firmer on being able to make a change in their riding. When I was a kid, I rode with Lendon, and you didn't make the same mistake again and again and again and again. You made a different mistake. Do it differently. Go to the other end of the spectrum and then find middle ground. Sometimes people are afraid to go off that. They want to make little tiny progress, and I think sometimes you have to go to the other end and find the middle ground. And people need to not be afraid of that, because that's what makes progress.
Just quick, first of all, I wanted to just add quickly about Allie talking about lunch lessons. In 1980, when I was trying out for my first Olympic team, I was lunged every morning at 6 a.m. For about 2 months, well, 5 days a week, by Mike Poulin, and after each lunge lesson, I could barely stand up. I mean, he ripped me to shreds, basically. But that was 1980, And I learned a lot after that and got greater skills, but I can tell you I never felt as fabulous on a horse as I did after those lunge lessons. And I was not a beginner, you know, that was my first Olympic team, so it wasn't baby stuff. I just can't emphasize that enough. But today I had one of my group of kids teaching another one of them. And she's taught beginners before up-down lessons, and it was her first time, and this was working on some shoulder, and the rider done a little bit, but was struggling with it. And I kept saying to her, I wasn't supposed to be paying attention, but I was, and I kept saying, she would say, more angle, and I would say, how? She'd say, well, use the left leg, and I would say, how? Where? And I just, those of you that listened to my talk a couple weeks ago know that you heard this from me, but I challenge all of you that teach to take a day when you're teaching, and whether you say it out loud, I recommend you say it out loud because you mustn't take anything for granted from your students. When you tell them to use their left leg, where? How? Not just left leg. How? Where? And why? And go across the diagonal. Why? Why are we going across the diagonal? Why'd you tell them to go across the diagonal? Well, change direction. Okay, that's good enough reason. But why did you go down the center line? Or something. Really make yourself either out loud, as I say, I do it a lot just in my mind. I take a day and I to myself, I'm going to make myself legitimize everything that I say. And it just will help you clean up your teaching. And again, not take anything for granted from your students, even if they've been your students for a while. Maybe you told them a while back, but did it register? So that's my little piece of advice. So we're going to go to some questions. Does anyone have any questions? Josephine, do your thing.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Ready?
Just keep your hand up and Jojo will pick it up. So we have one that's been handed in, and I think we could take the whole rest of the session on it. It's something I've played with. I know there's a pyramid of training for the horse, but what would you say is the pyramid of training for the rider? There's two microphones out there if you pass it around.
I think, at least for me, it would have to start with the seat. Because if they can't, I mean, and this is, again, going back to what I talked about, if you can't sit, you're not going to be effective. And then from there, you branch out. And you guys are welcome to take this on.
Yeah, I think it's already been mentioned through all of us here, whatever, the rider position is the most important part of teaching, and what we really have to address, and it often gets neglected, as Abby pointed out in her little talk for sure. But I guess in terms of breaking it down and the seed and how it relates, I think that obviously tied into our regular pyramid of training and the influence
Into the other aids.
into the other aids,
Yeah.
and how it develops the training of the horse.
When I sit on a horse, I think of the horse as an extension of my seat, and all the other aids then surround that center point. But without that center point, you can't even talk about the correct application of the aids if you have a faulty seat or a crooked rider, which we see a lot of, even in the CDI ring. And I comment about that if I see crooked riding, or I won't mention any names, but beautiful half passes sitting on the wrong side of the horse. Well, that's not a very centered seat, but I comment about it. And so I couldn't agree more. It starts with the seat.
I also think that it's, if something is too sophisticated too soon, it's going to stop progress. And sometimes something has to be done in a basic way and be done decently in a basic way, and then other layers get added onto it. Basic straightness versus sophisticated straightness, and sophisticated aiding on a responsive horse that is uphill and expressive moving and able, in a sensitive type of horse, to listen to sensitive aids from the rider is a very different half pass than someone at third level on a schoolmaster. So I think for me that everything has to be broken down to basic or starting that work to how sophisticated is it? Can you not see the aiding anymore? That's when our sport becomes more beautiful, really. I think we all would agree on that. But it has to be started in a way that it can be built layered. It has to be layered.
I think if I could jump in and say, obviously the base of the training scale is rhythm and relaxation. And so starting with, like you guys all said, the seat, but can the rider be relaxed while they follow the basic rhythm of the horse that they're on in the 3 basic gaits? I mean, I think that would be kind of the start of, like that's even more specific than just seat and posture and straightness. Straightness is a little higher up in the training scale, but can they, in a relaxed way, follow the rhythm of the walk, the trot, and the canter? Right, exactly, yep.
And then being able to influence the way it is.
Right,
after
influencing would, be like step number 2, yep.
When Allie spoke at our first session, she asked people to send in analogies, and we now have a 3-page list that's really kind of fun. I would like to challenge you all to send us your rider's learning scale. Send it in and let's share, send in yours and let's share it with the others. So I challenge you all, my email is graydressage@gmail, that's Gray. Anyway, okay, how do you all approach physical fitness with your students?
Barn work. The end.
I wanted to put out an ad where I live, which was a very, everybody did their thing at the gym, was, pay us, $50 a week and we will get you fit. We have hills, you're gonna lead the horses up and down the hills, you're going to be mucking stalls, you're gonna be carrying water buckets. Totally, yes.
Right.
Pay us for the privilege. Anyone else want to?
Usually it doesn't take more than a couple lessons for me where riders say, oh, I can't do this with my arm or my leg, and I say, oh, well, how do you work that out when you're at the gym? Or do you do yoga, or what do you do? And then they either tell me they do nothing, and then I say, well, maybe you should do something. Or they then relate and go, oh, I do have trouble with that arm or that leg when I do blah, blah, blah exercises at the gym. And I say, well, great, we'll work at it at the gym and then come back next week and let's see if it's better in the lesson. I have one of my ladies that I teach, I don't think she's here today, she does yoga in the barn aisle every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at noon.
For your client?
Yeah, she just does it right in the barn aisle. And I'm like, hey, you guys, look what she does. It helps. So
Fantastic.
yep.
I think anything one does in addition to riding is helpful. I think just going to the gym is not enough because nothing can take the place in the time in the saddle on a moving object. But I'm laughing because he doesn't know I'm going to say this. One of his pet peeves is when a rider comes into the ring and he watches them come from the stable and the horse is behind them, they're dragging the horse along in the reins and one little step forward, and then they come into the ring and then they try to make it, and he right away takes over, takes the horse, marches it forward around the ring.
This is how you lead a horse.
Because he does not like, which I'm not criticizing him, he doesn't like a horse to come in and somebody mounts and just gets going. He wants the horse to march around the ring, but so there's a little attempt at rider fitness too, but don't come in dragging the horse along and feeling that the rider is as lifeless as the horse looks too. So move, that's fitness as well.
Anybody else?
I have one comment.
Yes, please.
I know I made light about the barn work, but the other thing is that it's not even how fit you are. Andy Thomas was just in town and he came in and did my entire barn. He did me. Boy, you need to, you can get fit in the right way and relieve the tight side with some very simple exercises. So I think it's really to find somebody that knows how to do that and implement that into your own system. It's so easy and it's so effective and it's so helpful.
What made you want to teach? At what age were you when you started teaching?
I taught at a summer camp near where I lived, down the road from me, actually. So it was an easy way, it's an easy summer job, and I was horsey year round, because I had horses. And yeah, that was how I started. Carolyn Fuller.
I think I was really involved with Pony Club in Hawaii, and I think I started teaching the younger kids probably when I was like 14 or 15. So.
My dad is a college professor. My mom is a preschool teacher, which is a perfect combination of how to explain things really detailed and be extraordinarily patient. And I also started in Pony Club teaching when I was like 14 to the younger kids, and I've been listening to teachers my whole life, and here I am, still doing it.
I don't know exact age, but early teens, I would say, with a couple of local adults from the neighborhood that wanted to ride, and we had farm horses, so it was not a lot of teaching, but that's where it started. And I can't even remember if I was really interested at that point in teaching, but I mean, I did. And I guess I did like it, because now here I am.
I started probably in my 20s, had an opportunity to start teaching kids at the barn where I trained and so on. I did enjoy it, and then it was probably in the early 90s when I got involved in the certification program that I finally learned a real system and methodology in teaching, and that was so helpful to really put it together then, to start those pieces back then.
This is part of that question. I'm putting my piece on it. You're all busy teachers. Some of you are still riding, but you're busy teachers. Was it a goal to become a really good teacher, or was that just went along with that's how you paid for your riding?
Go Alan.
I love teaching. And it's interesting, my mom is she's retired now, but she was a very high level math and science teacher. So I hear you. But I find, at least for me, the training of the horses and the teaching is what, it's for me the most fulfilling part of what I do. For me, the competing is a means to an end to enable me to teach. Like, that was maybe the greatest gift of going to the Olympics, is that I can teach indefinitely from here on out because I've got some accolade. But I love it. It's important.
Before the others, I want to add something from what Allie just said. She's an Olympian, I'm an Olympian, and I know when I went to the Olympics, I knew this much, whatever this much was. And when I came back from the Olympics, I knew this much. But suddenly I was an expert. Right? Everybody wanted my opinion, they wanted me to write an article. And so, yes, there's the credential of having been Olympian, but man, there are a lot of wonderful teachers out there that have never been lucky enough to have the right horse at the right time or the right person behind them, etc. And I think we've got to be careful with ourselves and our students that just because they're an Olympian doesn't mean they can teach. Matter of fact, there are a lot of these wonderful riders that can't teach because it's just sort of instinctive. And that's why I was talking to this girl today who did that little bit of teaching. And I said, we talked about it afterwards, and to explain, and she said, well, I know what to do, but can you put it in words? And so I just want to throw that out. Anybody else on that subject of
I think I became a better teacher over the years than I started out to be. And I mean, do I have a passion for teaching? Yes, but I also have a passion for writing and training. I also have a passion for judging. And when people ask me, what do I like most? I say all of it. If I had to do just one and take away all the others, I don't think I'd be so happy. I'd have a nice balance. But I also, I've worked with some very good teachers, trainers, and then I've also worked with some that might have been wonderful writers, but not such good teachers. And I wouldn't say I was abused in the saddle, but I, had my share of being screamed at and, okay, why do you make that same mistake? But there was never any discussion or feedback of what I was really doing wrong. Just, it's wrong, you gotta do it again and make the pirouette bigger or small, whatever, but there was never any discussion how to do that. And I think at that point, I decided if I'm gonna keep teaching, this is not how I want to teach, so I've got to come up with a better system so I don't do the same to my students what a couple of them did to me. And when I think of all the horses that I could have saved, when I had to do the same exercise 50 times until I got it right, I could have saved the horse, had somebody just explain something.
I, like Bill, really enjoy the diversification and doing the judging and teaching and training still. Yes, we still ride. Not that, quite that way. But anyway, but I feel like every clinic I gave, I come away from feeling like that I gained something in becoming even a better teacher. Even just last week, I come away feeling like that was great, and now I need to do this to make the next one even that much better. And I really do enjoy that. I mean, I like working with the people that work every day, but I also really like working with the regular clinics when you go and work with people like once a month or maybe 2 or 3 times a year and really see the progress and work with them on that level too. But I think back to the judging, well, the judge's education and sitting at sea and judging has also helped a lot with teaching, as Bill pointed out before, and vice versa. So I think the two really complement each other, and then also we both are able to teach with the judge's eye too, when people are really looking to get in the show ring as well.
Anybody else? Oh.
I think if I can add just one thing to that, like from the judging perspective, the judging, we always have these like standardized words that we're supposed to use, to describe different things, and of course we have to do it, in short little phrases. But the nice thing about teaching is that if you explain it to someone using regular words and they don't get it, then like London said, you can immediately say to yourself, okay, that didn't work. How can I explain it some other way? What other words can I use? What other analogies can I come up with? How can I tie this in to make it work? And what I really love about teaching is when the light bulb goes on in the person's head and they go, I get it, and they do it. That's like the most fun ever.
It's like winning a blue ribbon.
It's better than getting a blue ribbon. Of course you can. You can talk all day.
I want to say one more thing. It's just like in training horses. There are no 2 horses the same. There are no 2 people the same. And you can explain a situation to one rider and they get it. And then the next person, for whatever reason, has trouble really absorbing what you were supposed to say. Well, it's just like training a horse. You've got to figure out another way to say it, and you can't get mad at that other person that doesn't get it, just like we can't get mad at a horse that maybe doesn't understand the exact same way we gave the aiding system on that one. So that's the beauty of teaching. We have to try to make it better.
Yeah, I think it's our job to make it better so that they understand it. Like, we can't just keep yelling the same thing over and over. It's our job to be creative.
I'm also completely comfortable with sending my students to someone else if I feel like something isn't hitting home with me. I often find that if they go hear it in a different way, it lands, and that helps me, and I don't take it personally. I'm just relieved and grateful.
I want to put a big exclamation point, star, whatever, on what she's just said.
Yes.
We instructors should be working as a team to help our students. That's all. We ready for the next one? This is a tough one. Yeah. I can't, whatever. Do you think that the effect or creation of safe sport has affected teaching your clients?
I'll start. Because I'm involved with Safe Sport on the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee and all that stuff. I will say that when Safe Sport was implemented, I frequently have underage kids in my barn that don't go away and they just get old and then they're adults, and that's wonderful. But I am extremely careful now about who we allow into our program. The parents have to get vetted too. You have to really rethink how you're handling things. I think about my childhood and just basically being free range roaming at the barn all day, like getting dropped off and then hopefully picked up right in the evening, and just running around and picking up rocks and doing whatever I was told to do just to be there. But you know, one of the great things that I think about were these one-on-one conversations I had with adults that weren't my parents, and how many things I learned from them. And what makes me sad is I don't want any child being abused or being in a bad situation. That was not part of my childhood, and I feel very lucky for that. But I think that would be very sad for these young people to miss out on these one-on-one conversations with meaningful adults that mentor them, you know, as part of their own learning and development. So yes, it has changed how we handle things, but that being said, you know, I hired another underage one, 2 years ago? How old are you now, Phoebe? You're old, right? Yeah, you're fine now. But she was 17 when we took her on, and we're looking at another one that's 17 right now, and we're just careful. So.
Anybody have anything to add? I think that covers it pretty well. Certainly going up and not just grabbing someone's leg. Saying,
Yeah, asking.
You have to ask.
You have to ask.
Yeah.
And then text messages, and then riding in the car, and getting parental permission slips. And
Putting seat coaches on. Like clipping,
Yeah.
clipping them on.
Yeah.
Clipping them on the ladies' belts
Yeah.
and everything in the ears. So no, we always ask.
Smart.
Okay, here's another easy one. What's the best way to teach feel? Dan, it's not me, it's somebody out there. Time to leave Bill.
Here, Chris, you go. You've been quiet for a while.
Okay.
Right?
This is sort of a hard one, but I also think sometimes you see. I'm going to start again. You have to be able to have the opportunity to ride a decently schooled horse, to know, or a horse that's not limping, or a horse that can go sideways in a leg yield, or can have a medium trot, and I think being able to have an opportunity to ride a different horse at times can really impact somebody's ability to feel, because if the teacher got on some of those horses, it probably feels like a cement block. So it's hard to have sophisticated feeling when you're riding a cement block.
Leading into that too, when I think about feel, or I relate things to my own learning, and some of the best moments that I have had from feel has been when I've been able to sit on the horse right after my trainer has gotten on, and I think that that biofeedback is really, immediate, and that's one way to help people out, is to sit on the horse and sort of get the horse into the place that you're looking for them, and then put them back on. I think that's really helpful.
I have one thing to add. I use analogies a lot when I teach. So like I tell people, does the horse feel like a yoga ball that's inflated or a yoga ball that's kind of flat? I have told people, what's it feel like to jump up and down on one of those little tiny trampolines versus one of those giant backyard trampolines, in order to feel the difference in tempos. And once in a while, I've actually been known to get out a hula hoop and give them a hula hoop and say, here, move your rib cage and do some hula hooping. And of course, they don't think I'm nuts, but I definitely will sometimes have them think about some sort of an analogy, like sitting on a yoga ball, and then I'll make them get off the horse and sit on a yoga ball, and then get back on the horse and see if they can have some sort of, like you said, feeling of transfer from one thing to the next.
Just so you know, Ann, they all think I'm nuts too.
Okay, great.
And we have about 10 hula hoops at our stable, if anybody wants to come and do some hula hooping.
Great.
One time at the, not the Masters, some other symposium we had here in Wellington, and that question was asked, and a very prominent person said they didn't believe that field could be taught, which I think is ridiculous. I think it depends on how ambitious an instructor is, whether you want to, try to project somehow that the rider can feel something. And Alan said, which I think is true, if one can ride, is setting the stage for that horse so the rider can get on and feel. And in my younger days, I used to ride every horse in every clinic. I don't do that anymore.
Smart.
But that's one good way. But I think setting the stage, whether it's a combination of exercises, it also depends on what you're trying to make a rider feel. Some people have never experienced a flying change. If it's a halfway trained horse, you can set the stage and the rider feels a flying change. That's not that big a deal for us that have been riding all this time, but for a rider that maybe has never experienced a flying change, gets to feel it. But more important than that, you can say till you're blue in the face about the quality of trot and the swinging back, and maybe Chris said if they're always used to a cement block, how can they then experience that? But if you can set the stage with a combination of exercises to get the horse going halfway decent, more often than not, the rider will feel a difference. So I do believe field can be taught if you want to work hard enough at it.
Certainly agree, obviously, with everything that's been said, but really reiterate about, I think, finding the right exercises for this horse and rider, and being an astute instructor to look at them and assess the situation and be able to describe, going back to what Lyndon said about you put the left leg where and how much pressure, like how many pounds of pressure do you feel here and there and so on. Riding, say, a turn of the forehand, the leg yield is a really good example to develop the feel and to improve the feeling of the contact, etc. But I think the specific exercises and the way you present them is super important, of course.
I want to throw out one thing I learned kind of by example up in New York when I was at my new stable, and the first winter the ground froze like cement, and for over a week we could only walk because the ground was like cement. And that was one of the most productive times in teaching my students of all levels. They could only walk and take the time and, if you want to use the word, feel their way through it. And even the more advanced ones, doing all these things at the walk. Walking can be really useful.
And I think riders sometimes forget that a stiff or unresponsive horse probably wears a fly sheet in turnout. it probably can feel a fly on its side, and I think that it's easy to say my horse is cold or my horse is non-responsive, but if we hold ourselves accountable to, are we trying to deaden our horse and sack it out to our aids, or are we awakening it to smaller, lighter aids? I think that that's a huge piece of feel, and being able to hold the rider holding themselves responsible for, am I deadening this horse, or am I being in a place where the horse can react?
I have one more comment on that too. I think too, as teachers, that it's our responsibility to show our students what is possible as well. Like that, I think about that all the time in my own learning and then what I do that is our job, to show them that it can be different, and it doesn't have to feel like that. It can be much better.
Okay, different subject. You may not like this one either. Do you compromise your teaching for someone who doesn't really want to learn? That is, they come for lessons, but if you correct them or help them in any way, they're not receptive. Do you tell them it's good when it's not? Sure.
I love it. Oops. So when I go and teach clinics, depending on how many I have in a day, like if I have 10 in a day and I get 9 out of 10 where I feel like, all right, it really, they understood me and they got it and they drank my Kool-Aid and it's good, I feel very, very satisfied. And I give myself permission and space to have one student where I feel like the lesson just doesn't jive the way that I wished it could have. That being said, I am blatantly uncompromising, which is maybe why it doesn't jive.
Go ahead.
I don't think I compromise, but I think clinic situations are a little different than home. You may end up with a rider in a clinic, and maybe it's a one-time clinic, and you do the best you can, and chances are you're probably not going to see that person again. At home, I don't think I compromise, and if there's that kind of a rider situation, they don't want to learn, they only want to come and say, I want you to just tell me this or work on that. Suddenly my calendar's too busy. I'm sorry, I just, I don't have the time, because I'm not going to compromise. I feel bad for the horse, and I can't bring myself to take somebody's money to just stand and say, good, 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 do it again.
I would say fortunately, and I think probably you'll hopefully agree, that most of the people that come to us, like 99% want to learn and they're trying. So hopefully it's a really rare situation. But as we said, in a clinic day or whatever, sometimes, as Allie said, you might have one lesson you come away with saying, well, that one didn't go to my expectation. And if it's a 2-day clinic, especially, I'll wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, well, what do I need to do different or better? How do I approach this person? What did I miss about this team that maybe didn't make it work so well, and try to approach them, or maybe have a little talk with them the next day at the beginning, like what can we do different, and what do you want to get out of it? That you have that approach. I'm sorry that as we said, we have to leave
Abandon
early.
us.
Bill and I really
Just
have to
go.
go. We had a previous commitment, and anyway, but it's been really great to have such a nice crowd here tonight, and glad we could be part of it.
Thank you, Bill, thank you very, very much. While they're sneaking out, I did have that situation that Bill was saying that we often don't have. I had a number of clients where I was in New York for a very long time who just kind of wanted to ride. They wanted to have their horse, they wanted to have their lessons. And not that I told them it was good when it wasn't, but I finally learned, first of all, I taught these people really badly, because I thought everybody was ambitious about getting better. And once it finally hit me that, you know, they just wanted to enjoy their horse. And they wanted their lessons, and they took a lesson every day in some cases. And I didn't tell them that it was good when it wasn't, but I had a different standard for them. And if it was this much better, fantastic. And so I definitely had a different way of teaching these. I always hesitate to say adult amateurs because we have adult amateurs who are very good and very ambitious and so forth. But these were people that just wanted to be able to tell people they did dressage or something. That's number one. And number two, the other thing that I think is really important is that you have that discussion with your students, whether it's a quick one in a clinic situation or maybe a sit down and have a cup of coffee. If you have a long-term client, is what are their goals? And if they tell me they want to go 4th level in the regional championships when they still have trouble posting the trot, I'm going to try to explain that this probably isn't going to happen and we have to readjust in some way. But I find that when I had that conversation with some people that I've been teaching a little bit, I went, oh my goodness, I had no idea that's what your goal was. You know, I thought you were more ambitious or less ambitious or whatever, and I think that's a really, really important part of teaching is making sure you know what these people want to do.
I have to add to that too.
I have something to say too.
Okay, go ahead.
So I know, like, when I go and teach a clinic, or even if I'm teaching somebody that I know that I haven't maybe taught for, 6 months or something like that, the very first 5 minutes of every lesson, I tell them to go ahead and do a little bit of a warm-up, and then while they're doing their warm-up, I ask them, I'm like, so how's it been going? And, what are your plans? I kind of sneak in that goal list, what are some short-term goals that you have with this horse? And while they're talking about that, because they usually take 5 minutes to tell me that and not just 2 sentences, I'm evaluating in my head, I'm evaluating the horse, where the horse is, what I think the rider can accomplish with this horse. Does this look like a horse that's going to go to Grand Prix by the end of the month, or does it look like a quarter horse that might get a better canter to vert by the end of the week? And then I try to take what they told me their goals were, along with where I feel like their horse and they are, and then in my head put together a lesson program for the day or the next 2 days of the clinic. And then in my head, I think, here's where they are, here's where I think I can get them, and then then I evaluate what's that span. Is it just this much, like Lendon said, or is it this much? And then I tell them it's good, depending on where they are in that range that I've sort of created, or that goal that I've created for them in their head based on what they said and what I feel like they can do. And that's a lot to do in the first 5 or 6 minutes of your clinic lesson, but I think it's our responsibility to do that, and I'm sure you guys do that intuitively as well. But just to explain how that goes, that's what I do.
Well, and just to add on that too, like I talk about being uncompromising and this and that. I am very patient in process. Like I know how hard it is to change things. I get it, because I'm still riding and training myself and taking lessons myself, and I understand that. So it's really, for me, also evaluating where the horse is and where the rider is and meeting them where they're at, and if they are moving in the right direction, being very, very encouraging, supportive of that. It's extremely important to me that people walk away, and horses walk away out of a training session, even if it was a tough one, that they feel confident, more secure in their decision making, and absolutely not defeated. Like I don't want anyone to walk away from a lesson with me thinking that they had a terrible experience and they feel worse after working with me than before they showed up.
I'll jump on top of that, and like, if it looks like we're halfway through the lesson and things aren't going well, I will drop my expectations and break it down, and I'll actually say that to the rider right then. I'll say, hey, we need to stop a second. Clearly there's some underlying basic misunderstanding that you're having about the exercise or with the horse or whatever. Let's spend the rest of the time seeing if we can fill in that gap so that tomorrow we can accomplish this goal that we're not obtaining.
Okay, this could be a very long one, so I'm going to make it very short. It's talking about lunch lessons. And could each of you just give the most two of your favorite exercises in a lunch lesson? Chris, you're being awfully quiet.
Yeah, Chris, your
Just
turn.
two lunch lessons, any two. Just throw out any two. Allie?
No, I got this.
Okay. He's got this.
I think probably would be closing their eyes and feeling and talking about the rhythm and tempo while the horse is moving without interference by them.
See, that wasn't so hard.
That was not hard.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if I have exercises. I think the ones that I benefited the most myself was a lot of sitting trot with no hands and no stirrups. And then being able in the trot and the canter to reach forward and turn around and hands outstretched too. Amazing.
So yeah, the first thing that I like to do is take their stirrups away so that they have to stretch their legs. And then the second thing that I do with an enhancement on the moving their arms around is moving their arms around in sync with the horse and doing it smoothly. Like one of the first, like I teach a lot of adult amateurs, and so when they do arm circles, even if I tell them to do arm circles, usually it's, and I'm like, fluid arm circles, and that's hard. That's really hard. And then to do it in sync with the stride so that they start to think about the rhythm. Those are really challenging, but it's extremely beneficial once you give them their reins back and their stirrups.
I think two of my favorites that are a little different. One is to ride with your arm in position, but your hands like this, completely loose. And they're gonna, you're trotting around, the arm, the hand should bounce. The arm should be still, but if you're, and then do transitions without tightening the wrist or the fingers. So you're doing transitions like this. And my other one, sorry, I've got to stand up. And I have to say, this was one that I did a great deal with Michael, ripping me to shreds. In a very nice way, of course. And the thing is, I hate the big fat knee rolls, thigh blocks on saddles nowadays. That's just my opinion. We grew up without any of those. But anyway, so it makes it a little more difficult. And the important thing is you lock your knee and you point your toe. Everything is locked, and then very carefully bring the leg back. This way, slide it back. It can only go so far, and then slide it forward. But again, the thigh block will get a little bit in the way. And then slide it straight back, and one at a time, then alternating. And to be able to do that walk, trot, and canter, it really helps to open the hips and so forth. But it's important. If you don't lock the knee, you'll be just moving your lower leg like this, and there's no value. The point is here, and you've got to do it carefully because you probably could hurt your hips.
I have an add-on to.
Okay, please.
Yeah, another one that my instructor used to make us do was to take both your legs and throw them over the front of that saddle and back in the trot and the canter. That's a really good one. And in lieu of lunge lessons, if you have a horse that's safe enough, I would really recommend you go get a bareback pad, because that'll fix someone's seat real fast. They'll fall off. No, they will. If their pelvis is locked the wrong way, they will fall off.
I wish, when I think back, and I bet most of you were the same way, to the things that I did when I was a kid, that I truly wish I could tell my students to do, but I get sued so fast. You know, I mean, and I know that's much of what my success was the charging around and the riding bareback. I mean, I'm from Maine and we rode bareback all winter. We literally put our saddles away and we rode bareback with hackamores all winter long. And jumping things that, you know, oh, look at that table, let's go jump that table. You know, I mean, it was just, and bareback wrestling and pulling each other off the horses and so forth. But we really learned how to sit, and you know, I didn't get bucked off. Because I could ride most anything, sit on most anything. Anyway, wait, what was my next one going to be? Oh, yes. How do you know when your student is ready to move up a level? That's a little difficult, but give us a couple of ideas.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, it's not a difficult one. Like competing?
I mean,
So, you know, the golden rule is that you should be showing at a level below, right, that you're at. So for me, that's how I think of it. If you can start moving forward, if they're competing like at first level but schooling second level, when I feel like they could move up to second level, they're probably schooling the third level stuff. I mean, to me, it's very logical. And if they can't, they can't.
is there a score that you feel they should be getting before they move to the next level?
I don't like people to go compete. Like, for me, they have to be able to run through the test at home with no mistakes, and it should be cresting at a 70.
I agree. I like to make them ride the tests at home, and mistake free. Getting close to a 70, as you know, as depending on the horse. Depending on the horse, great.
I think I got it. I agree with all that. I also say, I try to, a lot of people, it's interesting to me how many people don't want to see, have their lessons videoed or their training session videoed. And I say, well, I have to watch it. So if I have to watch it, you should have to watch it, first of all. Second of all, I say that you have to be able to be happy with 80%, I don't mean score, but you need to be able to be happy with 80% of what you have, or less than that, at horse show than what you have at home. Because even at the warm-up, I say, okay, well, if you could do 80% of, you know, that medium trot or something and be happy with a little less. If you can't be happy with a little less quality, then you're not ready to go show at that level. It has to be that good and reliable at home to start with.
And slightly on the subject, I think, you know, I have people say, well, I'm just showing training level. Well, hey, that's not such an easy thing to go out there and do a really good training level test. And be proud of the fact that you can, you know, you're going to go out there and do a really good training level test. Let's face it, there's some Grand Prix horses and riders that probably could do a training level test. And a nice snaffle and a nice reaching frame. Anyway, that's a whole other subject, isn't it?
Yes.
Or, you know, whatever level it is, this necessity to go up levels. And since I'm getting up on my podium here, soapbox, the desperation, I've got to get my bronze medal. I've got to get my, whatever it is, I've got to get it. Well, yeah, there'll be time, you know. What? No, I've got to be the youngest person to do it. I run into those. Or, you know, whatever. The wonderful thing about the medals of the USDF, you can take as long as you want. And let's, I always think of the lady in Alabama when I was showing there, way back, who showed third level. She was the only person showing third level. That was the levels, I mean, second level was wow. And she showed third level and she got scores in the 30s and 40s, but she got a blue ribbon every time because she was the only one doing it. Are you really proud of that? You know, let's do a really good job at this level. And you can be schooling anything at home, but when you go in that show ring, are you and that horse coming out of the ring feeling really good about it, and the judge is going, yes, because they love to give good scores.
We do.
We love to give high numbers.
Okay, what's my next question? Okay. Do you have a way, we all know this coach is very in philosophy. Do you have a way or a suggestion as to how to relate to a student who comes from a very different philosophy, other than trust the system? How do you deal with students having contradictory training? You probably get that a lot, Alan. Do you? No?
I mean, a little bit, I'll start.
A little bit what I said in the beginning, like, is as I go out and teach a lot, there's rarely somebody who I encounter where I'm like, wow, that I don't, that's way off in left field, like that I don't understand. I think that for the most part, there might be 10 roads to Rome, but we're trying to consolidate it in the right direction in general. I think that if I have somebody that is really disagreeing with what I'm trying to explain or this or that, at some point, like, they have to trust in what you're doing for them to take the risk to even be a little vulnerable to try something different. And if I'm not that person for them, that's fine. But you know, I can't think of a situation recently where that's happened, but for sure when I was younger, you have people that are like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm like, okay.
I think the last time that I ran into a situation like that, it wasn't that far off in left field, and I was able to find a different lateral exercise and to do something, and I then said, oh, so where is your weight when you're doing it like that? And they went, oh, it's over here. I'm like, kind of like I wanted you to do in the other one. And they went, oh, well maybe. And I went, perfect. Let's give it a shot my way. So I mean, I think if you can find a sort of a similar setting in a different exercise, and then tie that back in, you can kind of explain to them, hey, maybe there are more than one road to Rome, and just see if you can be related in any way, so that they're at least sort of intrigued by your explanation.
I think we all are sticklers for basics, and I think what I run into the most often is, I'm showing fourth level at Preset George, but can you trot around the ring with the horse stretching a little bit into the bit, or can you give your left rein and not have it go whew, or whatever, and I have to say, that's what I find the hardest, is to convince show riders, convince them that yeah, maybe they can ride a canter pirouette, but can they walk, trot, and canter?
Well, and
to add on that, like Michael Barrisone used to tell us, and it probably came from Michael Poulin, keep your first level horse in your Grand Prix horse. I like to ask them to do 10-meter circles in the trots and the canter. And that can be very revealing, especially when they're that trained.
Paying attention to the questions. Any other questions? Anybody want to pass anything up or stand up? I have one question here. I'm going to try to read it, but your handwriting isn't very good. Observe, and you can interrupt me if I'm reading this totally wrongly.
You don't need to help, because I know it's a really bad handwriting.
Is this yours?
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
I wanted to say that I've observed this at 2 boarding barns, the one I'm in now.
Can you stand up so everybody can hear you?
I've observed this at two boarding barns, the one I'm in now and the one I was in last time. And I don't think any of you know where I am, thankfully. But the first clinician comes and she's fun and young and cool, and everybody's all excited about her. The second clinician comes and she's correct basics. She's telling them when they're right or wrong, and she's way more qualified than the first instructor. What do? They want the first instructor to come back. At our barn right now, we have two trainers that are coming there. I'm like, oh my God, how did they pick these people? Did they look for qualifications? How do you get owners and riders to look for qualifications?
That's a good question.
That's a tough question.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the clinician, I remember coming to my table, the ones that, you know, let them do the sequence changes or the pirouettes or the half pass or the leg yield or whatever level it is, and I look at it as more entertainment rather than truly teaching. It's so much more fun when you get to do all the tricks.
Yeah.
I think I can start. I mean, I'm an S level judge, and so when someone comes to me in a clinic and they say, oh, I'd like to, you know, do 4th level, and I'm like, okay, perfect. Can I see a trot, halt, trot transition? And, you know, of course, it's kind of off the bit and working and stuff, and I'm like, okay, let's start with that. And yeah, they all want to go work on the canter pirouette, and I'm like, great, but your first move from intro B on up is trot, halt, or maybe walk, halt, but trot, halt, trot that's way down at the bottom. So it's very easy for me to start at the basics. And, you know, like I said, I feel like when I have a conversation with those riders, I'm like, hey, I'm a judge, and I can tell you that there isn't a judge out there that's gonna skip over your entrance just to get to the canter pirouette. As a matter of fact, they're going to be a little questioning your canter pirouette after, if that's your entrance. You know, that first impression makes a huge difference. So it's pretty easy for me to say, let's go back and work on the basics. I'm sure Allie's a basics queen too.
Something, I don't know about queen.
Queen could be disputed. Like when I listen to that question, the one thing that comes to mind, so you're in a boarding barn situation, can you haul your horse away from the boarding barn?
Oh, and actually, we have wonderful trainers for my horse.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like when, that's where I would just I would observe but not participate and be I would choose my own destiny with my own training.
Sad for the horses.
But they're the other people's horses. I mean, I'm sure if it's all bubblegum and rainbows, it's not that bad, right?
Good point, yeah.
So,
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say it's not everybody has. Some people are more of the people that Lennon was talking about, who wants to come out and have their lesson and enjoy themselves, and where other people are
Do
going
tricks.
to do tricks and be able to tell people they did, you know, whatever movement. And other people are having different goals of being able to do something proficiently. And I think, yeah, and you have to go into that and keep yourself in that mindset of, okay, my goals are different than their goals, and that's okay, as long as the horse isn't being abused.
Thank you.
Okay, I love this one. What path do you recommend to the young rider hoping to become a trainer, instructor in the future?
I can start with that.
Go ahead.
I'm happy to start with that.
Go ahead.
go work for someone that you want to be like.
That's it.
End of story. Boom, it's done.
Well, I can add a little bit to that. Go to the shows, watch people warming up, go ask Allie if you can sit under a tree while she's teaching and listen to her teach, and then go ask Annie if you can go sit under her tree and listen to her teach, and then go ask Chris if you can go sit under his tree and watch him teach, and if they say no, then you probably shouldn't be watching them teach it.
Yeah.
With the idea that occasionally you have students that don't want somebody watching, you know, they might say that. But there's, I mean, for heaven's sakes, those of you that are down here, how many opportunities are there to watch fabulous teaching in places, I mean, at the stables, and then coaching at the shows. And the fact that you're here says that, you know, we're preaching to the, is it preaching to the choir? You know, you're showing that you're interested in education. How many of you have read some good books on dressage? Learning about how to teach. And as I was saying earlier, when you're riding, you know, let's just say you're warming up and maybe you have a nice 3rd, 4th level horse, and then you're doing a little shoulder in. Can you, as you're doing your little shoulder in or your leg yield or your trot halt or your trot walk or your halt walk or whatever, can you put what you're doing in words? It's one thing to do it. It's something else entirely to explain it. When I would do teaching seminar things, we would start out and I would say, okay, I want you to teach me how to pick up my pen. Really hard. Or open a door. That was one of my favorites. Tell me how to open a door on the door. Can you put that into words? And so as you're riding around, can you put it into words? It's something, that's a whole different skill to say it rather than do it.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
Well, I'm going to add something that London actually said 2 weeks ago that I thought was amazing, and I used to do it all the time too, was be that I would sit down next to some clinician and watch all day, and I was hoping that after the lunch break, I could predict what that clinician was going to say before they actually said it. And I do that even now when I'm listening to someone else teach. I try to predict what they're going to say, because then I know that I am seeing it, understanding what the clinician is looking for in a way that I could regurgitate it to that rider if I were teaching them in this same method. So that's a great piece of advice for anybody who wants to be a trainer.
Now this will be our last one, we're almost done. Your number one thing, and maybe there isn't a number one thing, education, accreditation, accomplishment, you would say was the most impactful thing in your career?
Here, Chris.
When I went through the certification program, I'd already made 2 Grand Prix horses, but doing that, and I had a barn full of students or whatever, I was busy. But I think that was a huge piece of, because it was the first time I'd ever been taught how to teach, and having to put things into words and to do all that, and to go and also I didn't finish college. So a lot of people are good test takers, and some people, I rode horses for a living. I didn't take tests. So to be putting yourself in a testing situation, for me that was a big deal, and I think that certainly opened my eyes to, and our program was good then, but it's so much better now, just because it's aged. I mean, and it has different generations of people involved in that program now, that, you know, so I think that, for me, that was a huge piece. That was more important than a gold medal at a Pan Am Games. things or something?
For me, it was a gradual thing, and some of you have heard me talk about it, I mentioned it earlier, was when I finally realized that not everybody was like me, wanting desperately to get better, wanting desperately to be the best I could be. It wasn't competing, it was being the best I could be. And so I taught everybody the way I wanted to be taught. And when it slowly got into my head that other people were different, that I needed to learn about teaching, that's what led me to this moment right here, that we need to be learning about how to teach. And that was a gradual thing, but man, what a difference it made in my life and my teaching, that it wasn't just doing it the way I'd always done it.
Sure, no. I'll go. I know one of the biggest things in my whole career, because I grew up in northern Minnesota, which is essentially very close to the Arctic Circle. And we rode Arabians, and once in a while they would cross these Arabians with quarter horses or thoroughbreds, and that was about all we had. So we, barely any instruction. We always had to put the horse in the trailer, and the trailer at 3 hours to get lessons, and you only could do that a very limited amount of time of the year because there's snow up there for like 8 months a year. It's awful. And I finally decided, I'm not getting anywhere near the consistent training that I would need to be good at this. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to Florida. And when I came to Florida and put myself in a full training program for 2 months or 3 months every year, and not only for myself, but then to sit next to my trainer and listen to these lessons over and over and over again, it swung my pendulum to the point where I realized exactly how hard you have to work to be really, really good. And from there, it put everybody else that I taught in perspective, because I knew where the top was, and then I could infiltrate everybody that I was teaching as to where their goals were and where their horses were into a spectrum. And then I do the same thing when I'm judging, is, I judge the top level horses, well maybe not the top level horses because I'm not an FBI judge like Bill Warren is, but I judge the Grand Prix horses, and then you can put the rest of the horses all the way down to the training level in perspective. And just gaining that perspective was probably the best thing in my career, and then therefore I can put everybody that I teach somewhere on that line and then give them an appropriate lesson where they make progress, but I'm not pushing them way out of their comfort zone, nor am I not pushing them enough that they can make any serious progress.
I have a couple things. I think about, I'm incredibly grateful for the time when I was a working student for Sue Blinks. She was still competing at the time. I went with her as her groom to the WEG in 2002, and being part of that tour and getting to see things behind the scenes was such an incredible education for me early on. And then I think about the fortunate position I was in with the Kundrens, getting sent off to Jan Brink and spending a year in Sweden in his program while he was still competing, and running the stallion station and all that, and the experience of being behind the scenes with that. And then the third major trip that the Kundrens sent me on was to go train with Kira Kirkland and Richard White, and I was with them for a year and a half full time. And it was an unbelievable, all three situations was an unbelievable education. And I think about that, and I would strongly encourage anyone who has any desire to pursue this on a high level to seek out who you can, and it doesn't have to be abroad, in this country, who is exceptional at what they're doing and has reached a high level, and go work for them and go behind the scenes like that. That is a big deal. And the other thing I want to mention is one of the perks about going to the Olympics is that suddenly I was able to do some other things after, and Will Connell very generously sent me to a coaching accelerator program at the USOPC in Colorado Springs. I want to say I think it was in 2018, and that was really eye-opening for me and changed how I operated significantly. And I'm very pleased that I've been able to participate in more coaching programs. It's made me basically just a better person, on top of a better trainer teacher.
It's interesting, I was just looking at this group. We have northern Minnesota, center of the dressage world, Hawaii, really the center of the dressage world, northern central Maine. I remember my sister doing second level exhibitions and everybody went, ooh. And Massachusetts, but when he came to me, he'd been riding Morgans. I mean, at the beginning, would anyone have thought that these people would have gotten to the point that they had? But they sought it out. They sought it out. They didn't sit around waiting for it to come to them, but they sought it out. And that's probably the biggest piece of advice here that they're all giving for those of you that are thinking about it. So we've run out of time. Thank you all for your attention. Really appreciate it. And I just want to throw out that, in case you all don't read, we find very few people do nowadays, we do have, for those of you that do teach and would like to broaden your education by going and sitting under a tree and not being able to do lessons that day because you're sitting under a tree listening to Allie teach or somebody, we do have the Training4Teaching scholarship, the teaching scholarship, to make it possible for you not to have your income that day so you can go get some education. So there is a flyer up there about that. I won't go into more detail. So thank you again for coming, and please take some food with you, okay?